Hey everybody, welcome to Outlier on Air, episode 425. This is the podcast where we talk to the founders, disruptors, and mavens of the world. As always, I'm your host, Ever Gonzalez. Thank you for being with us. On today's episode, we have Joshua Jackson. Does that name sound familiar? It should. Joshua is best known for his leading TV roles on The Fringe, co-created by J.J. Abrams, The Affair, and Dawson's Creek, the show that made him famous. He's also the chairman of Liquid Media Group, an entertainment company with a strong portfolio of content IP across creative industries from video games, films, and digital streaming services. Liquid is building the leading community for creative professionals, empowering storytellers to develop, produce, and distribute across channels and platforms. I really had a great time on this episode with Josh. He was generous with his time and was very open about starting Liquid Media, being a child actor, and talking about fear. I feel like Liquid Media is much more than just another company. It feels like it's a mission for him, for the Vancouver creative community and beyond. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. So without further ado, here we go.
Time, weather, and highways. Case of the various
Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Personally, I've been a fan of your work for the past, I don't know, it feels like 20, 25 years. Does that sound right? Right? Maybe a little bit longer.
I mean, I'm not supposed to admit it, but yeah. It's been a minute.
That's right. And I mean, I love that you've had a consistent work from, your days at Dawson's Creek, we'll get into here in a bit later this episode. But I love that now there's a big push for business. And obviously this being a little bit of a lifestyle business type of show, we want to dissect everything that you're doing, business-wise, career-wise, and everything in between. So again, thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. Happy to get into it.
Let's do this. So with your career, now business, there are a lot of other actors, entertainers that have kind of done similar things, right, with the entertainment part of it, with the business part of it. With that being said, what makes you an outlier?
I think what makes me an outlier is I'm 30 years into a 2-year career. The entertainment industry is a very fickle industry, and I started at a very young age. And there's every opportunity and reason to not be able to make the long journey. But I'm 30 years in and hopefully have another 30 years ahead of me. So I think what makes me an outlier in that is just it's given me an opportunity from a very young age to be on a set, around the business, in the business, and just watching and learning, which is an opportunity that not very many people have, I don't think.
Yeah, it's a kind of an education, right, that you've received over the last 30 years, and that kind of sets you up perfectly for what you're doing now. So let's get into it. Liquid Media Group. What is it? How does it work?
Liquid Media Group is just what it says. It's a group of entertainment companies, mostly based here out of Vancouver, though not entirely, that is trying to position itself in this radical paradigm shift that's happening inside of the entertainment industry. And what it does is tell stories. So we are agnostic about how the stories are told. So we have a gaming division, we have a filmed entertainment division. We're actually bringing on a comic book library. Want to get into that business, the graphic novel business. And I'm of the opinion, we're of the opinion that stories don't really have necessarily a single place that they need to be told. That a good story can have multiple different channels that it lives on, and multiple different ways to reach its audience and to increase not only the engagement but the enjoyment of whatever that story is. I think, if I use an example right now, so when I was 15 or 16 years old, I first picked up a Game of Thrones book, right? And loved those books, was a big sci-fi fantasy nerd, really, when I was growing up. And now with this show and the expansion of the world, and to a certain extent, the video games, and to a large extent, all of the other channels of the way that content is being created, as a fan of the original books, I have a deeper and richer experience. Now, obviously, that thing's a massive global level success, so that itself is an outlier. But I think that is the storytelling of the future. That I think in my career, we have mostly thought about stories in single silos. They're movies, they're TV shows, they're plays, they're whatever. and they don't really live in other places. And I don't think that's the right way to think about a good story.
Yeah, it's funny as fans of whatever, right? Game of Thrones or whatever it is we're fans of. After we're done reading it, watching it, whatever, it feels like we want more, right? So we search for more, and so it sounds like you're making it possible for the story to continue in a few different formats. And I mean, as just a casual fan of some of these shows and some of the things that you're doing, that's very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's very exciting for me as a storyteller. I mean, that's kind of what I figure my job is over these last 30 years, to help tell stories. And it's also very exciting for me on the business and opportunity side, because I think, we have, I don't know how old you are, but I'm turning 41 in a couple months. So I have grown up through a radical paradigm shift in the world, right? The internet era, being born obviously before the internet era, being raised mostly before the internet era.
Thank goodness, by the way, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, yes, we can get into that too. But holy, I am so very, very happy that Twitter and Snapchat and all the rest of that stuff did not exist when I was in my early 20s. But the connectivity that has allowed, when I was in high school, and there was like two or three of my friends who were also pretty big sci-fi fantasy guys, and we would read the books and we would have debates, and then we would move on to comic books and debate, who could beat who and what power was really stronger. But it was essentially our little group of people, right? And then in the chat room era, you had a slightly larger group of people. But now the amount of eyeballs that can be drawn to something, whether or not, I mean, Game of Thrones obviously is an outlier. It's a gigantic property, but no matter what your thing is, you can find a group of people somewhere scattered around the planet who are into your thing, which I think is just super cool. Mm-hmm. And I think our job now as storytellers is to recognize that those opportunities to keep people engaged in the stories that they love are fantastic. I mean, for me as a fan, as a person who wants to dive deeper into these worlds that I spend so much time in, I think the obligation for us as storytellers to meet people at their desire, at their demand. There's never been a greater opportunity for us to be in service of that mission, right? To be in service of the story, to be in service of the audience.
How much time are you spending with the company, right? We've seen other vanity companies from different, entertainers, stars, all that good stuff. But it sounds like you're kind of in, right? I mean, you're, I don't know the day-to-day stuff, and let's talk about that. But how much time are you spending growing this company?
Well, my plan was to sort of be like ankle to knee deep, but right now I'm sort of eyeball to over my head deep.
Uh-huh. which is great, by the way, right?
Yeah, no, it's an awesome, and obviously it's not just me. There's a team of people here, but the conception of this was not, because there are vanity projects, and I've had the opportunity over my life to, what we call in the entertainment industry, like hang out a shingle, right? Like my vanity production company, that is maybe there to do work, but mostly there just to let me tell myself how good I am. And I'm not really like, that doesn't really get me out of bed in the morning. And I'm a Vancouver boy, and was, I started my career and have at various points been working in Vancouver and around Vancouver. And from the very earliest time that I was here, one of the things that I noticed was that when I would work in Canada, there was a constant sense of like impending doom. And when I would work in the States, there was a sense of like, not only do we deserve to do this now, we deserve to do this again later. And that disconnect always kind of caught me off guard. And as I got farther and farther into my career, I kind of realized what the actual gap was ownership, right? Vancouver is a giant production base. Depending on the year, it's either the number 1, 2, or 3 largest production base in North America. It's doing literal billions of dollars of work a year just in the production service side. But because the ownership of most of that material is kept elsewhere, it keeps the entire city in a place of panic, like, oh, well, this could go away. And it's a bit of the Canadian personality as well, right? And so when the very initial conception of this business, when me and my co-founding partner, Daniel Cruz, when we started talking about this, that was actually the thing that I wanted to redress the most, right? The work is being done here. The talent is here already. The infrastructure is here already. The government support is here, yada, yada, yada. But what nobody has done is try to take the risk to frankly put up the capital to take an ownership stake in the material that's being created.
Yeah, after doing some research, that's what it felt like. There's some cool things going on in Vancouver, but it feels like you and the company and the team are trying to put your arms around it and saying, "Hey, let's do this for real. Let's be professional about this. Let's bring in the talent. Let's let this talent, the homegrown talent that's here, stay here so that they can have meaningful work." That alone, building that type of community, seems like a gigantic type of I don't know, work ahead of you. What does that feel like? Because you're kind of taking the reins there in Vancouver when it comes to this.
Well, when it comes, yeah, I mean, I guess we are I'm Canadian, so I want to find some humble way to not say that, but yeah, it's true.
And so that comes with its own risk, right? Not just resources, but time wasted, maybe others not kind of liking the way you're doing it. Other bigger competitors kind of coming in and getting into a bloody fight. What does that look like for you?
Right, and all of those things are true. I mean, I don't mind, breaking some eggs to make the omelet. So like in most things in life, I don't think that you're actually striving for the best if everybody's getting along perfectly at all the time, right? So I think I don't mind being a little bit off-putting in the pursuit of this goal. Obviously we don't want to be monsters, but I think that part of, you have to shake people out of complacency, right? And there is a degree of complacency that comes with the already high level of success that Vancouver has, and that's understandable and fair. But to my mind, there is, if I think the total I'm using Canadian dollars here, but the total production spend last year in film and entertainment in DC, which is predominantly based out of Vancouver, is like $3.5-ish billion, right? So if that's just the production spend, and there's no real metrics, so I can't tell you what the number is, but you can imagine it's not a 10x, it's a 20, 50, some gigantic number X of what the real value of that material is as it goes out into the global market. And in the film industry that I started in, the gatekeepers weren't really interested in having outside partners co-invest and take ownership stake because they were the gatekeepers and that's the way the business ran. But as those gatekeepers have become part of larger corporations themselves, as the demand for content has exploded, so the requirements, the capital requirements to create that content have exploded, there is an opportunity to be a co-invested owner in the content that is being created in a way that just did not exist even really 10 years ago, right? And so when I look at the landscape of Vancouver, I think to myself, okay, so we've got the infrastructure, we have a local talent base, right? We play well with the massive companies to the south because the work is already here, right? The work is already being sent here. So we're not trying to convince somebody to spin up this idea in an entirely new geographic location and like go through the growing pains of building out the infrastructure. The piece that's missing, the only piece that's really missing, is somebody on our side willing to take the risk. And so maybe it's because I've been in the States for too long, but I thought to myself, I'm willing to take that risk. I'm willing to bet on the talent base that's up here and the value of the material that's being created as it goes out into the broader global market.
Even though you've been doing this for a little while, right? It still feels like a startup, but on top of that, you guys are making some deals and you guys are making some noise. So you acquired Open New Age. You have a deal with A&E Networks. I mean, things are happening, right? I mean, what is this going to look like in 5 years?
Well, so I still consider us, we're not technically bootstrapping anymore, but we're just post that. So in my mind, we're basically just getting started now because we went down a path to get ourselves listed on NASDAQ. And it took us longer than it probably should have, but it took us a solid year to finalize the merger that got us there and then get past the initial listing requirements with NASDAQ. So that kind of took a year off the board for us, which was very frustrating for all of us, but it took all of the resources that we had to focus in on that. But the reason that we did that was to be able to position ourselves and to have access to, a big board and the capital that swirls around on a big board, in the anticipation that this paradigm shift was going to be happening over the next 3 to 5 years. And then in the last 4 months, basically the entire industry just said, no, we're putting all of our chips on, cloud-based connectivity and streaming content. And so while I think we were maybe ahead 2 years ago, right, we were sort of like pitching into what we believed the future was going to be. And then we spent our time preparing ourselves for this moment. Even we were caught off by how quick the shift was going to go. So now I believe we're in a pretty rapid growth phase, right? Which it's an exciting time, but it's a bit of a whirlwind right now.
As you continue to grow and build these relationships, these deals, right? You're kind of getting more press about what's going on there with the company, right? That's great, and that's what we want as founders and entrepreneurs. But that also puts a big target on your back,
Totally.
right? And there are huge players in that space. Does that keep you up at night?
It definitely keeps me up at night. There are huge players, and we are definitely not only the new kids on the block, but we're like the scrappy little underdogs that could, right? I mean, I think when we were listed, we were either the smallest company on NASDAQ or
Really
close, right? So yeah, I mean, we understand that we're a baby in this, and we're mostly making hay off of a good idea, right? I do think the part that lets me sleep at night is that the terrain is shifting and has shifted so fast that institutional knowledge, as important as it is less of a key factor at this point. And you mentioned the A&E deal, so to me that's like our proof in the pudding, right? So that the first title in that deal, and we're going to have more things to announce, but the first title in that deal is Ancient Aliens, which is exactly the kind of business that we want to be in. Now, we don't have any ownership stake over the actual television show of Ancient Aliens, but there is a TV show, right? Long running, has a great fan base, and people tune in and they love that world. And then here is this game that allows you to go, and not directly related to the on-screen content in the TV, but in that universe, now you can have a sort of your hands-on gaming experience. And we want to be able to reproduce that over and over again, because I think that's very, very smart. And you look at the companies that are coming online with these OTT services, lots of them, particularly when they're coming out of the tech world, are bringing in a bunch of fresh ideas to an industry that sort of has its way of doing things, as every industry does, right? So when Apple comes in and puts its chips on the table and says, oh, well, that's not how we do business, so we're going to have to figure out how to be a streaming company that needs an entire catalog of material now, like right now. Let's figure out how to do that in a new way. That to me is incredibly exciting, because there's the mechanics of making a show probably won't change that much, but the DNA of how to choose a show, how to find an audience, I think that's going to change a lot here in the next 6, 8, 12 months. And the landscape of the entire entertainment industry, if we look out 2-3 years, I think is going to be radically different. And then I think it's going to be radically different again in like 5 to 8 years, because I don't think all of these platforms can survive. And so when that consolidation happens, there's another conversation to have of like, well, who gets the library? Are we going to go into, the Hulu model where everybody plays nice together and everybody takes a smaller piece of the pie, or will this become a Game of Thrones thing where everybody has to buy, so one person can sit on the throne?
Yeah, and on top, that's just exciting, right? I mean, that's business, and it evolves and it keeps moving. But what you're doing now is, I don't know, it's making waves, and a lot of people are interested in this, obviously, because it's such a loved type of thing for a lot of us, right? Again, whether it's movies, books, entertainment, whatever. What you guys are doing is, in my opinion, tell me if I'm wrong, there's a big play for gaming as well. I mean, it feels like that's going to be a little bit of a niche on your end as well. Let's talk about that for a sec. Your gaming portfolio.
Yeah, it's not a little bit of a niche. It's a huge portion of our strategy. So I think this is an interesting generational shift that's happening. So the single biggest driver of the film industry in the last, say, 10 years has been the advent of the Marvel movie, right? The comic book movie.
Sure.
So the generation of people who are running studios who grew up with comic books are in power right now and have been in power for the last 10 years, right? That was their generation, and they brought their stories to the screen. Obviously, a lot of things had to happen. Some of it was just technological, right? You couldn't really make a good version of Iron Man in 2001, so it had to come out in 2008 or whenever that was. But a lot of that is just that the creative talent at the very top, right? The guys who were making those decisions, and unfortunately, it was mostly guys at that point. The guys who were making that decision, those were the stories that spoke to them, because they got hooked in when they were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the generation that comes after them is also maybe comic book fans, but what they really are, and what we all are now, is gamers, right? So I think, I mean, this is why for us, it's such a key part of the strategy is this Ancient Aliens deal is, like I said, this is the proof in the pudding of what we want to be doing, is that, you know, eventually we want to own the underlying property as well. But I think that the future of how you tell a story and how you engage with an audience looks much more like, you know, streamed television content, or whatever we're going to call TV in the future, streamed content and a gaming experience, than it does a comic book into a film experience, right? I think many more people around the world are engaging in that way. And because we all keep these little supercomputer screens in our pocket at all times, and people, I was on the plane 2 weeks ago. I was flying up to Toronto, and the woman sitting next to me had her laptop open in front of her. She was working on her laptop, and occasionally she would pull out her phone and she was playing a game on her phone, and she would go back to her work. I think that's basically everybody's experience.
Absolutely.
Of work and life, and the you know, whether it's literally just a time suck game that you do mindlessly, or it puts you back into a universe with characters that you like. And I think that, you know, the barrier between those two places has really broken down. And then to get into the weeds a little bit, part of the reason, you know, it's been a holy grail for a long time to like have a big movie and a big game come out at the same time, right? And have them to kind of talk to each other, have the story be close enough. But the production cycle on those two things is different. And so it made it impossible to sync the two. And since gaming has been treated sort of as a, you know, as the redheaded stepchild of the business, the movie always came first. And unfortunately, the production cycle meant that the game needed to come first and drive the movie. And that's just not the way that the creative flow went. Well, now the production cycle, you can turn around, not a AAA game, those take a long time, but you can turn around a totally engaging independent level, or like a high independent level game that has all of the features minus the like full on cinematic graphics, and you can bring that out, you know, day and date in time with a story. So I was talking with somebody the other day who's a very talented writer, and you know, he's building out this idea of like, he's currently, I can't say because it's not our property, but he's currently working on something where there's a show on the air that has an ingrained mystery into it, and he's writing an episodic game that sort of picks up at the end of episode 1, takes you out into a different place, and brings you back by episode 4. So you're still in the main narrative of the show. So for me as an audience member, I get to go and expand the universe of what I'm seeing on screen and have a deeper level of engagement. And you know, the reality of the gaming experience is that you're in control, so you get to take possession of that character. And to me, I just think that's super, super cool.
Yeah, very exciting, right? Again, we want to be a part of it, and obviously we're cheering you on, and just this whole move into it being us being surrounded and immersed kind of in whatever we love. So congrats on that aspect.
Thank you.
You know, the position that we're in with Outlier, we've had 400 plus episodes. We've talked to a bunch of entrepreneurs, founders, right, CEOs at a lot of different levels. The festivals and conferences that we host, we're surrounded by these smart, young, I mean, sometimes not so young entrepreneurs. And it's always kind of the thought leaders in the space are always talking about focus on one thing and be the best at it, right? And so obviously there's an argument on both sides. But for you, right, you are still making movies, right? You have the shows, you're in theater, writer, producer, all that good stuff as well, and running this business. Both of those by themselves are difficult. How are you managing both right now, on top of that, a personal life and all that other good stuff?
Well, so to answer the first part first, like I actually agree with that to an extent. I mean, I'm not sure that the focus on one thing and do it perfectly, that actually to me seems like a bit of outmoded thinking. Mm-hmm. You know, this is the generation that is coming up behind me, right? The millennial generation is living inside of a world where like nobody gets the job at IBM, spends their 35 years and gets to retire now, right? So everybody has to have a bit of a generalist in them. But if you go one level above that, then I agree with the statement. So I would say, like, what is the one thing that we want to do well and remain focused on? And that's storytelling, right? The one thing that I want to make sure that we do really, really well, and we keep on putting ourselves in the way of talent that does really, really well, is to just tell stories. And then we'll figure out the what the like how the sausage is made after that. But so long as we focus on telling the story, I think we're going to be okay. And then for me, the balance, I knew I planned this year to be posts. I mean, I was hoping on this, so thank God I didn't jinx this. But post us getting our listing approved, I knew that we would be in this launch phase. So I've actually not taken any acting work from then till now, and I'm pretty solely focused on making sure that this is like up and on its feet before turning back to that, because this is incredibly important to me, and it's something that I've wanted. And we talked earlier a little bit about the idea of like vanity projects, and the reason I never got into one of them before is because it wasn't of interest to me. And so being a Vancouver boy, and I think you can hear I'm pretty passionate about the opportunity that's here. Like, this is what I want my Vancouver legacy to be. So I'm really dedicated to making sure that this works. And so I haven't worked out the balance yet, because I'm pretty solely focused on this. And then as we get up and on our feet, and as the team gets built out, then I will hopefully return to my other career. But my intention is to stick with this. This will take constant attention, and it will take constantly being willing to change with the changing landscape, because the landscape of entertainment is shifting radically. I mean, maybe not quite day by day, but it kind of feels like that. I mean, it's just a very different world here in the end of April than it was even in February. So we have to be constantly attuned to that.
With everything that we've read, and obviously with this conversation specifically, this whole thing sounds like more like a mission than a money play, right? I mean, although it sounds like it's obviously going to be very profitable if you get it right, and execution, all that good stuff. But it truly does feel like you're trying to build something there in Vancouver that's going to benefit, the area and those around you. So congratulations. I mean, that alone is a big deal, right? And we talk about legacy, we talk about all this other stuff. I mean, that's where it's made, right? Boots on the ground, and trying to help and uplift those around you and the space around you. And it feels like you're right in the middle of it. You're in the trenches.
Well, look, the I recognize. I mean, I've been in a very cutthroat business for my entire life. So if we don't make money, this thing doesn't work, and we can't achieve anything. So the making money portion of it is definitely, that's something we're focused on, and we know that we have to do that and perform. And like you said, we have to, have this plan, and we have to execute this plan. But you're exactly right. The thrust of the business is not simply a money play, right? There are easier ways, frankly, to just make a little pot of money. And I am of the opinion that, like, if the money is the central focus, then you're putting the cart before the horse. That if we build this thing and we get it right, and we are able to be, good citizens in this community, and allow people here to rethink where they are centered inside of the production cycle of the global entertainment business, I think that will in itself lead to financial success. So our central focus is not on just making a pot of money, but it is we are a mission driven company, right? There's a reason why we're based here in Vancouver. There's a reason why we're trying to do it the way we do it. There's a reason why we break the companies that we brought in, the way that we structure those deals, to make sure that the leads there are empowered to grow themselves beyond the place that they've been able to get to. Like, that is all that's the central focus of the business.
There's a company here in Utah, Cotopaxi outdoor type of gear, and we had him on the show, the founder, and he's always, because they give a lot back to the community here in Utah, and just the outdoor kind of community in general. And he gets a lot of people following him, asking him questions. And on the show, he was talking about how he was presenting at a conference, and a lot of the millennials, right, a lot of the younger people are like, I want to build something that's going to give back, and I want to help the world, which is fantastic, which is great. And he said, okay, go build a company that makes a lot of money, and then come back and let's try to help those that we want to help, because we can't do it if we're not making any money, right? And so I think the biggest impact, like you mentioned, is still making revenue and paying your employees and all that good stuff, and continuing to grow in order to be able to make the biggest impact in whatever space that you want.
I mean, money is a voice in this world, right? And so like nobody's doing this out of charity. So you are cutting off your own voice if you pretend like the money doesn't matter. So we're like, we're not in the charity business here.
That's right. Listen,
So
we're big fans of what you're doing, and we wish you nothing but success. Now, if you don't mind, I'd love to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the career, in entertainment, but first of all, let's talk about growing up. You're born in Canada, but somewhat raised in California. Let's talk about that for a second.
yeah, so I was born in Canada, spent my first 2 years up here, and then my father's job moved to Southern California. So ended up living in a little town called Topanga, which is just outside of LA. Mm-hmm. Then my parents got divorced, and so my mother, my sister, and I moved back slowly but surely to Canada. We sort of LA, San Francisco, a little bit in Ireland because my mother's Irish, a little bit in Seattle, and then back to Vancouver.
So it feels like you have the best of both worlds, right? With the Canadian culture and the American culture. I mean, I know they're similar, but still there are differences. What was that like for you growing up?
Yeah, I mean, there are huge differences, honestly, and it's not only just the American culture versus Canadian culture, but the traveling around thing, and my mother being Irish, so even going to see Europe, and just being exposed to different things, to being exposed to different places, different people, different cultures. And I was a curious kid, and that curiosity was nurtured by my mother. So I was raised in a very supportive household by my mom. And having a parent in the house when you say, when you were 10,000 whys before breakfast, why this, why that, why the other thing, and having a parent who's there and willing to answer the whys and nurture and foster your curiosity was incredibly helpful, especially because we were moving around a lot. And the reality of my childhood, obviously this didn't mean that much to me as a kid, but I look back and I recognize the impact. But after my parents' divorce, our economic situation changed radically. So it also changed like the places I was living and the types of places I was living in and the people that I was surrounded with and the communities that I was in. So that exposure and, having a parent who was there to kind of like help me to understand these radically different like shifts inside of our life was incredibly helpful. And then this part I didn't like so much, but I think this very much helped me in my acting career because we moved around quite a bit in the first several years after my parents' divorce. It's kind of like being an army brat. Like you get used to being in a new school, having to make new friends, and it's easier, I think, when you're really young. But as you get a little bit older, it gets harder and harder and harder to like get over just being embarrassed by being alive at 12 years old.
I mean, just that age alone, it's difficult in the perfect setting. In the setting you grew up in, it could be obviously a lot more difficult. Now, your mother was in the industry. Was she in the industry when you were a kid, or was it a little bit when you were, in your teens and 20s?
No, so she was. I can't remember how old I was when she retired, but so she was in the industry before I was born, and then stayed at home to raise the two kids while my parents were together. But then after the divorce, had to go back to work. So then was back in the industry, and I am a unashamed product of nepotism. So my very first job, my mother was a casting director, and my very first like real acting job was a movie called Crooked Hearts in 1989. And she was the casting director, and her casting assistant also was a single mom and had a son. And because single mothers don't often have people to like take care of the kids, depending on the economic reality of your life, we were in that office a lot. And they were trying to cast up two younger versions of the two lead actors, who were Pete Berg and Noah Wiley. And after seeing all the professional actors, either my mother or the lead casting director from LA, somebody said like, well, why don't you just send those two in here? Because they actually talk to each other like they're brothers, right? They hang out with each other all the time. And so sure enough, they brought us in the room and they gave us the job.
And so was that the start of it, or did you want to get into that world even before you were cast?
I mean, I was so young. I mean, so far as the legend goes, so far as my mother tells me, the first time I ever expressed interest in being an actor was watching TV commercials and seeing this, whatever it was, some toy on the TV, and saying, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, I want that." And her trying to explain to me, that kid, that's not real. That kid's not having that good time. He's being paid to do that. And I guess in my little brain, I was like, hold up a second. There's a
Mhm.
job where you get paid to play with the toys. Like, I want that.
That's
I don't
awesome.
want the toy anymore. I want the job. So it's a great story. You know, we're Irish, so we are kind of storytellers. I would like to believe that that's actually true, but let's go with
Yeah,
it.
whatever
um,
works.
exactly. That's the story that I'm told, and I'm sticking to it. So that was the beginning. But you know, when I started, I was such a kid, and because again, a single parent family, my mother had a job, so there was, I had to work and do stuff, and had to contribute at an early age, but also needed something to keep me not idle and not just like out running in the streets. So my paper route basically was being an extra on set, because it's a place that my mother knew, on the weekends and things like that. It's like my mother knew where I was. I was around adults. It was a mostly it's not a great environment for kids, but it's not a terrible environment for kids. And so that was kind of how it started. But it was never, like I was not the musical theater kid who knew that this was my life's mission. I kind of grew with the idea, and it was only when I hit the first real hiccup in my career, like the first real downturn, and it was taken away from me for a while, that I realized how important it was to me, how much I loved it, and how much that place of expression was important for me.
Interesting. So you didn't know until it was taken away, which I think is a story of a lot of people in a lot of different industries.
Well,
Um,
yeah, and especially when, like, not that I fell into it. I had to work for it as a kid, like everybody does. I mean, you had to do the auditions and do the stuff you don't enjoy doing. Uh, but it wasn't until it truly went away, before I realized that, oh, this isn't just like a fun thing to do, and it isn't just a distraction. Because when you're young, honestly, outside of my house, like, I never had a teacher that was like, this is a good idea. And I remember specifically, I was kind of a troubled child, I guess, or had problems with authority, I think is what they used to say. And my elementary school principal and my high school guidance counselor were always like, if you keep this up, like, there's no future in this for you. So if you like spend all this time thinking you're an actor, you're going to ruin your life, basically, was the message. And it's treated as a frivolous or a silly job. So I think I kind of internalized that and was like, okay, well, this is something to do for now, and eventually I'll become an adult and do something real with
oh,
me.
so yeah, you didn't know that was going to be something that you were going to continue to pursue in
It
adulthood.
never, yeah, it never dawned on. It wasn't until Dawson's Creek that it really dawned on me that this was something that you were allowed to do over time. I didn't know, like, we didn't, even though my mother was a casting director, I didn't really know actors, right? We
Mhm.
didn't grow up in, it wasn't, and I didn't grow up in LA where you're like, oh, look, people do this for a living. Like, this is a real job that grown-ups do.
Yeah, let's talk about Dawson's Creek. It must have changed your life, right? How old were you when you were cast?
I was eight. I was 18 when they cast. I was like just about to turn 19. So it was the spring of my 18th year when I was cast, and I was 19 when we went back to go and do the first season.
And it played a solid, what, 5 seasons? Is that what it was?
5.5, yeah, 130 something episodes. Yeah, so we had a very good long run.
And so that's a huge hit, right? I mean, it changed your world, I'm assuming. Um, I want to talk about that for a sec, but also talk about, right, there are a lot of one-hit wonders, right, in music, in movies,
Sure.
in shows, right, especially when it comes to young actors. They do one thing that kind of puts them in the spotlight, and then they just kind of don't recover from that and don't go away. You've had a long career of great shows, right? Fringe, The Affair, and everything in between. A lot of movies. I know a lot of stage stuff too. So let's talk about after Dawson's Creek. What did you feel after it was all gone?
Well, when the immediate aftermath was relief. I mean,
Oh, really?
it's just a shitload of work, right? And the like doing 24 episodes a year of a television show, I don't have anything to compare it to, because I've been in this career my whole life. But it is, that's a solid 70, if not more, hour week every week for 9.5 months out of every year.
It's crazy.
And it is just and it's hard for everybody, right? And if I'm working 70 hours, it means like the Teamsters are working 80, and it means that the hair and makeup people are working 75. And right, that portion of the business, I think, probably has to change in the long run, but it's a crazy amount of work. And that, and it's not always that satisfying, to be perfectly honest. Like, the feeling of network television for an actor, in my estimation, is mostly like the feeling of not failing. That's the best you can do, because you're doing 7, 8, 9 pages of work a day, right? And then you're doing it again tomorrow, and you have to get all of that stuff done, right? You have to get basically a 42.5 minute mini movie done in 7 or 8 days, and you just get on, and it's an insane amount of work for directors, it's an insane amount of work for actors, it's an absolutely insane amount of work for writers, like, to come up with, what is it, it's like 1,500 pages, basically a very long novel every 9 months. And expect that the material is going to be good and engaging and well thought out and make sense from week to week. It's hard. It's really hard. And so that the stress level is very high. So to be able to bring that show home, know that it was ending, right, and get to the actual end of the story, the immediate feeling is relief. Like, oh my God, I can take a deep breath. I know that this is done now, and I can be proud of the accomplishment of this thing, right? And I can breathe for a second, because it just consumes your life. There's nothing else really going on while you're in that intense depth of work. So that was my initial feeling. And then in the year after the show closed, I think I worked in 4 films that were, not all of them, in fact most of them, not very good. And partly in retrospect, I realized that it was because I was just so in the habit of working, right? It was just like I was now conditioned. Like, if I wasn't on that treadmill every day, I just didn't know what to do with myself. So then I slowed down a little bit, and I was a little bit burnt out, to be perfectly frank. I was like, just that sort of mindless, like, well, this is what I do. So I go to work and I just keep on working. And then I went and did a play in London, and it was doing the play in London, and it's the exact opposite of the television experience, right? You spend time rehearsing. You actually get into the language of the play. Each beat means something. You're not just gliding through things. And it was a 2-handed play. David Mamet was the writer. 2-handed play with myself and Patrick Stewart, one of the greatest actors on the planet. So now I got this like master class to go and sit with this, and he's a wonderful man too. So the work dynamic of like, oh, okay, I'm gonna see if I can, like, hold my own against this master in the thing, and just see where my weight is. And that experience reinvigorated my passion for the job, not just as a thing to do, but as, something that has purpose and meaning. And so it was really that play really sort of kicked off the next phase of my career.
Yeah, it feels like it, right? Not that the stuff that you were doing before was fluff for the most part, but it did feel like you started to focus on it, and maybe taking it seriously is the wrong way to phrase it, but there was a little bit more focus on the content and the work,
Yeah.
and things like that. It felt like, anyway, from the outside.
I think taking it seriously is a totally fair thing to say, but it's not the work that I didn't take seriously. It's myself. Again, remember that I didn't come from a family of actors, so, and there weren't a lot of professional artists in my world growing up. Right, I grew up in a neighborhood called Kitsilano, and a great place to be a kid, but that wasn't, there wasn't I didn't know what that path was, and there's all this weird kind of guilt stuff that goes with with the success of a show like Dawson's Creek came money like I had never even conceived of, right? I mean, there were many weeks I worked on that show where I would make in a week what many of my friends' parents would make in a year.
Sure.
And that throws you into a very, like, the feeling of I'm not worthy that comes with that is incredibly intense. And so I think part of I don't have the right to ask for something that I want on top of this thing that is already so much. And so I don't think I gave myself credit as a craftsman, as an artist. I definitely didn't. Like, I literally couldn't even call myself an artist, even though technically that's what I was doing, because I was like, I haven't earned that, and I don't feel that. And I think it was after the play where I was like, you know what? I think I've changed my conception of what I'm allowed to be inside of this profession. And I think most of acting is craft work, right? It is, you learn the tools of the job. And then when you have, and then you have those moments of artistry, and that's what we're all trying to seek out. But I don't think it was until I was in my mid-20s that I was willing to give myself that credit.
But you found it, and has paid off. It looks like in your work, right, and the success that you've had. So there must have been a lot of. It would have been so easy to kind of see you go off the rails, right? Especially with success right off the bats like that, like you received. What kept you grounded? I mean, even this conversation, it feels like, we're two buddies sitting out, hanging out, just chatting about it. There's something real here. What happened? How did you keep it together, basically?
It's all a front. No. So I think, I honestly think it's a combination of, it's kind of like things in life. It's a combination of a lot of things. So it starts with my mother, right? It starts with the house I was raised in. And when I got into my career, because my mother worked in the industry, she was extremely clear with me, like, this is a job, right? You got to go in here and you have to be respectful of it as a job. And these are grown people who are doing work. And I will not allow you to continue to do this if I hear that you're loafing or dicking around, or like, you got to go in, like, if you respect it, it will respect you. So I think that set me up in a good way. And then I had the benefit of some pretty great mentors along the way. So the casting director, the American casting director from that first movie, became my first agent, a woman named Laura Kennedy, without whom my career simply would not have happened, and who was a great mentor and sounding board. And I was a kid growing up, and there's another man who became my manager named Mike Berkhamshaw, who I worked with for 17 years, who, these were like good, decent people who were willing to shepherd me along, right, and sort of teach me the ins and outs. A big part of that was Emilio Estevez. Like, I had never been on a big movie set before. I had no idea what that whole world was. And his patience and grace, not just with me, but with all the kids, in like teaching us, if we were willing to learn, like, how to do it, was instrumental. And then I had Vancouver, right? I think if I had been in LA after the Mighty Ducks or during Dawson's Creek, the path of my life probably would have been very different. But when I would, especially, like, I really distinctly remember when Dawson's Creek came out and I went back to LA and suddenly people knew who I was, I found that so uncomfortable, like, just so unpleasant, that I just came home. And I don't think everybody has that. So I came back to Vancouver, and I was with the same group of guys that I'd grown up with my entire life, back in the neighborhood. And even though my personal situation had changed, like, nobody here gave a shit. Like,
that'll keep you humble for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And and that camaraderie of, like, look, dude, like, congratulations, but you're still the same dude you were yesterday. It's incredibly, it's necessary, but it's also, it gives you a sense of your place in the world, right? And in a positive way, in a very positive way. So I think that was a good thing. And then, I've had the opportunity to survive my downturns, which I'm not sure that everybody does, right? And so I think a lot of the ways in this business is crazy, and it's such a fickle mistress. Like, it can just decide tomorrow that you're just not that dude anymore. And I have had the opportunity to survive. And in some ways, I think people often conceive of, like, starting as a child actor is a negative, but for me, it's been a positive, because I think the ways in which actors get stuck quite often is that, you stop putting in the work because it's hard and it can be a grind, and it's embarrassing sometimes. You got to put stuff on camera that makes you uncomfortable, and it's hard to, want to push yourself into doing that. And so I think when you see actors get stuck, they resort to tricks, or they're like, oh, people like it when I do this. But, I literally can't go back and play the characters that I played because I'm not 19 anymore. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I had to continue to learn and evolve because I was learning and evolving. So I think that helped me as well. And then the rest of it is just some things breaking my way. Because if I do, if my first time back to TV after Dawson's was Fringe, right? So if I come back and I do Fringe, but Fringe tanks and it doesn't work, and it is always a crapshoot. I mean, you never know. You try to work with the best people you can. You try to make the right choices, but you just never know. And so that changes the arc of my life again. If that show doesn't work, then maybe it's like, oh, maybe this guy is past it or whatever. because like I said, the business will just change its mind on you in a second.
Well, I love, again, what you're doing, and where you got to this, you're at this point where it feels like another avenue is opening up for you. And obviously all the hard work is paid off. I want to be respectful of your time. So I have a couple questions, and they can be rapid questions if you'd like,
No, I mean,
you've been gracious enough to give us an hour. So we want to keep it as close to it as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not hustling to get off. So ask away, and I'll tell you when they come grab me. I'll let you know. But I think we got to.
Fantastic. That'll work. So right after the success that you've had early on, so people know your name at that point, but you still have to go and audition, and that must have been strange, or maybe not. I mean, maybe it's the way the industry works, but for me, it feels like it would have been strange. People know you, they've seen your work, but you're still auditioning for parts, and there must have been some rejection there. After you reach a certain level, that must have been difficult when you didn't get some of the parts that you really wanted. What was that like?
I mean, honestly, the experience of being an actor is like, 75-80% rejection.
Yeah, that's tough.
It is tough, but again, if I had started it in my 20s, maybe that's one thing. But because I started it really young, it just became part of the tapestry of the business, right? That there's no single, there's many things that I've wanted, and there's many things I've wanted pretty badly. But there's no single thing that I've been like, man, if I don't get this, it means I'm a shitty human being and a terrible actor. So, I mean, I was just in an audition the other day. There was the movie was casting up, and if you think it's difficult at like 19 to do it, imagine being 40, sitting around with a bunch of dudes. You're like, man, we are getting old, because I've known you for 20 years now. I've known you for 50. We've seen each other since we were kids, and we were all sitting in there just laughing about. I mean, it's like it's like old home week. You go into these rooms and you're like, wow, we have been like. There's a lot more gray hair in here than there used to be.
That's right. and so rejection, right, must be difficult. Does that play into, I don't know, fear of going in and trying out for a new role, especially these high profile ones? What's your relationship with fear at this point in your career?
Well, my relationship with fear has remained pretty consistent over the course of my life, both inside my working life and out. That I break fear into two different pieces, and into catalytic and paralytic. So the paralytic fear is the one that I think is problematic, right? When the fear stops you, then you're in real trouble, and you need to analyze what it is that is putting you into that place, because that's not helpful. But catalytic fear, I find to be like some of the best moments of my life have come, out of the heightened attention that you pay when you are either physically afraid for your life or something close to it, right? So I have a tendency to run towards catalytic fear. I think that is a very healthy place. You get to know lots of things about you. Whether or not you're ultimately successful in your pursuit, you really know your own weight after you have faced down something that puts you into that fight or flight mode. So the rejection of an audition, my relationship to that has changed a lot over the years, because when I'm 16 and you don't know what your own worth or value is one thing, but I'm 40 years old now. So if you don't hire me, like, that's your fault. So my relationship in that way has changed, but I made my Broadway debut last year, and I'm pretty confident in my skills and abilities as an actor. That was the single hardest thing I've ever do. I had to learn sign language and perform in 2 languages on stage for 2 hours. It was
Children of a Lesser God, for sure.
Yeah. So it's the type of thing that only kind of a fool would take on, but that's the catalytic fear, right? That director and I are close friends, and he's a guy that I love and trust. And when he brought that to me and said, like, I think you can do this, I think he believed in me even more than I believed in myself. And like I said, if I'd known what exactly it was I was taking on, I probably wouldn't have had the balls to do it.
Uh-huh.
But to get up there and say, I'm going to learn this language proficiently enough that I can communicate with my co-star, the wonderful Lauren Ridloff, and we can communicate not only on stage but off stage, so we can build this relationship purely in a language that I'm just learning. And then I'm going to believe that I can perform a character in these two languages for an audience every night and do it on the biggest stage in the world, that's a lot. That's a lot of catalytic fear. And that motivation will keep you riding high. Like, you never take your eye off the ball in that situation.
I love what you're saying about fear, and that you brought up this play. We'll talk about it here for a sec. But as entrepreneurs, right, it's very relevant to us as well. For me in my personal life as well, the fear, and obviously there have been things where fear got the best of me and I didn't take that leap or that chance, and I regret some of those decisions. Other times there are things that come forth. It's something that's, afraid of, fear. But the greatest successes of my life are on the other side of fear. And so I like that you brought up this play. Difficult, right? You had to learn a new language, or sign language, like you mentioned. Broadway play. I mean, that's something to sneeze at. That's a big deal there. It obviously paid off, right?
Yeah.
So are you taking? You made it sound like you've kind of had this mindset ever since. Is it getting easier for you? Is it the same? I mean, what does that look like?
Well, I think if it was getting easier, I would do something else, right?
Yeah.
So that to me, because I mean, that to me is like, really, that's the acid test for everything. It's like, what is this feeling that I have in my stomach when I start to engage with the idea of doing whatever this thing is, right? And is it like, what's my resistance? Is it vanity? Is it just pure fear? Is it what if some hidden trapdoor in my psyche that is trying to stand in the way of my success? Like, what's going on with me that I'm feeling this response? And is this the lesson that I need to be learning right now? Do I need to be able to push through this thing in order to take my next step as a person, as a professional, as an actor, whatever, right? And so that has always been a driving factor. It's why I love rock climbing so much, and it's why I love whitewater rafting so much. Like, there are moments in that experience where you must be focused solely on the task at hand and be very much in touch with yourself as you work through the psychology of, like, surviving, right? And the little deals that you have to make with yourself of, like, nope, you're just going to push through this no matter what happens next. You can't stop, right? Because stopping is death. And in some cases, it, like, literally is death. But in a professional sense, like, if I stop here, I am accepting that this is the best I can ever be. And that is in itself is a kind of death, right? So I'm going to use this fear of shame, of embarrassment, of whatever it is. And I'm going to use that to keep pushing me forward, even though I'm kind of stumbling around in the dark, and just have some faith in myself that I'm going to find a way through this to another side. And then I'll get there and I'll take a deep breath and we'll find the next terrible thing to push through, right? And that, to me, is the game, is just keep on finding, I guess in the sports world, like, guys talk about this, like, the bulletin board material, right? Like, what is the thing to keep yourself motivated? And I think, for me, in a lot of my work life and in my personal life, it's been like identifying what it is about something that scares you and then pushing yourself to push into that uncomfortable place.
I love that. And it's one of those things, lessons for entrepreneurs that are listening, right? I mean, it's again, one of those things where fear is uncomfortable. Obviously it's not pleasant, but on the other side, there could be great success. I'm glad that you're talking about that. Now, as you're growing up, right, in your 20s, 30s in Hollywood, I think it's a little bit, and you're in the industry, obviously, so let's get some insight. It's a whole lot different than in your 40s. It feels like for men, for leading men, I think that's where your sweet spot is, right? Isn't that like 40 and beyond? Isn't that where, like, the George Clooney type of roles start to come around? What are you feeling? What does that look like for you in the next 10, 15 years?
Well, the answer is yes. Like the best time of a male actor's life is sort of 35 to, let's say, 50, 55, somewhere in there. So, I can't say that I had this idea in my head when I was 12, but, like, it has dawned on me in the last 10, 15 years, like, if I could just survive through this next phase of my career, then there's good stuff on the other end of it. And at the same time, I've become much more material and legacy driven, right? I guess this is the benefit of sustained success, is that at this point in my life and career, it matters much more to me about the who and the what than the why. So the people that I work with and the story that we're telling is now really the central focus for me going forward. And that hasn't always been the case, right? And I admit to that, even though you're not supposed to, but it is true. Like, there's been different motivations for different things, and I'm much more focused on the who and the what now.
Well, Josh, I really appreciate the time you've spent with us. You're obviously doing some amazing things in business. The career has always been on point. It feels like it's continuing to rise. Again, you're in that sweet spot where I think a lot of amazing things will continue to happen for you. We wish you nothing but success. We're big fans, and we're going to continue to follow your career. Josh Jackson, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. This was a pleasure.